Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. This is Agenda AWANI with me Najib Arif, and we are still at the Khazanah Megatrends Forum 2025, debugging uncertainty. And of course, one of the speakers here is a Malaysian physicist working at the very frontier of human knowledge. Dr. Khoo Teng Jan is part of the ATLAS experiment at CERN and world's largest particle physics collaborations, and famous for discovering the Higgs boson. Of course, every second, CERN's detectors record up to 1 billion proton collisions, and Dr. Khoo's team decides in microseconds which ones are worth saving for science. And of course, beyond the physics, his work reveals something much bigger, which is what science can teach us about decision making, risk, and also innovation, and lessons that go far beyond the lab. With that, we are really glad Dr. Khoo for joining us. Thank you so much. This is not everyday's topic, basically. Let's start off our discussion with the ATLAS experiment. If you could share with our audience about that particular experiment.
Sure, I'm happy to describe it. Now, the ATLAS detector is a particle detector. It's built to study the physics of events in the Large Hadron Collider. This is colliding protons, not the National Kaya. No drivers were harmed in the making of this experiment. So yeah, we're colliding 30 million times a second, and we need to, what we do is we capture the particles that come out from a collision in something like, that's a combination microscope camera. So it's a layered detector, sort of like a bawang, with high precision devices in the middle, heavy metal detectors outside to stop particles as they pass through, measure their energies solidly, and then another layer of special detectors to find muon radiation. It's a special, very penetrating kind of radiation. So with that, we then do a heavy data analysis on all of the particles that are emerging from these collisions, try to find correlations and so on that tell us about the fundamental physics of the interactions that are happening at the basic level.
Let's talk about the culture behind it, because you lead a team that must decide in split seconds, right? So in conjunction with Khazanah Megatrends, we talk about leadership, we talk about decision making during uncertainty and all that. So which particles, collisions to keep on discuss in terms of making that particular split decision. What can that teach us in terms of making fast decision and smart decision in that sense?
Okay, well, of course, right, we can't, we're human, and making a decision in 25 nanoseconds or 2 microseconds, that's beyond us. Yeah. So we're depending on fast algorithms, special electronics and software. So where the human part comes in is in designing those algorithms, figuring out in advance what exactly those particles are that we want to capture, simulating and designing methods to extract the interesting information, and that's all prepared in advance. But in addition, we of course have unexpected things happening, hardware failures and or just novel conditions. So we need to rely on a number of further contingencies. Firstly, we need to validate the software and the algorithms that we're writing very thoroughly in advance. We're doing daily, weekly, monthly testing. And then once we deploy them, we need to have a lot of monitoring of the relevant metrics. We want to reduce what's going on in the detector to the important information that tells us, is it currently okay? Do we need to make corrections? And we need to have a team on standby to watch for issues and then react immediately with a pre-planned strategy once something unexpected happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we can learn from this particular experiment, because you and your team are dealing with a lot of unknown in that sense, and that same thing goes for businesses as well. How do you and your team have that confidence and also in tackling the unknown things, and when you literally searching for things that may not be exist in the first place? How do you manage this situation?
Okay, right. So when we are trying to publish our results, it's important for us that we don't just make a claim. We need to make a claim with an assessment of how precisely we know that claim or how uncertain we are about it. Right. And that's a big part of not just our science, but science in general. Right. So it's all based on this validation, but an assessment of the things that we know we don't, well, our known ignorance. We have procedures to assess how much the conditions we're assuming may vary, and we filter that into our final results. Another aspect is called blind analysis. So we are not allowed to look at the data because it could bias us before we have constructed our full strategy. So we'll build a strategy, we find ways to validate that we think we have understood well all the unknown things that we are taking into account, and only then do we look at the data to understand whether we were being sensible. The data has to be the judge, and of course then if we can repeat the analysis later on with different data sets, then we can correct for anything that we've done wrong. That's of course the essence of the scientific method. But we're, on the one hand, as you alluded to, we're optimizing for the things we know about and the things that we've been told we should expect. But we're always hoping for the unexpected, because that is where we actually learn something.
I want to ask about what can we learn from physicists especially. Could the way physicists handle uncertainty be useful for business leaders today, especially, or policymakers, in dealing with economic shocks or AI disruption or uncertainty in that sense?
I'm sure they can. I mean, in fact, I'm sure they do, because it's such a quantitative science now, and well, even the data collection, the data analysis that is being done. I'm sure that a lot of things are being applied. I think the difference perhaps may be in what our emphasis is, because we are looking to really quantify our knowledge. We want to be very clear about the limits of that knowledge. And only then can we try to learn from that and improve our theories. So in a similar way, I suppose if one takes the long-term view more than immediately eyeing short-term profits, then that sort of refinement of the models and say conservatism in the extrapolations may be of use.
Yeah. I want to talk about the what can we learn from CERN, because basically what can Malaysia learn from how CERN turns scientific knowledge into real world technology and also innovation. What can we learn from that particular subject? Okay.
Well, it's also a matter of sometimes expecting the unexpected, because
right.
We're not for many of the projects that we're defining, we're not focused on the applications, right? The core science is, in general, not going to be applicable in 100 years, in 1,000 years, I don't think, because they're so far removed from our normal scales. However, what we need to develop is always the technical capability to do that science, and it's there that the spin-offs arise. Sometimes perhaps in the application of the algorithms, we're now looking into ways to do extremely fast machine learning on hardware and so on. There, maybe we can push the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, and also at the same time, many industries is talking about data-driven culture in that sense. But of course, same goes with the scientific research as well. But how is data really used in science, and how can Malaysia, basically replicate that mindset in its companies? Okay.
Now, I think it is also true at the same time that some business applications are actually driving the edges of data processing a little bit beyond the scales that we used to do in academia. But again, right, we're emphasizing the key lessons that come from that data in some fundamental sense, and not always looking for the immediate applicability. Again, actually, maybe another point is that we always have to be very skeptical of the data. We have to be challenging our assumptions and assessing where the data may indicate something, but because of instrumental effects or theoretical conditions that we haven't taken into account fully, our initial interpretation may be wrong, and it takes a bit of reflection to see whether we can actually tease out what's under that.
Let's talk about Malaysia and also the mega science in that sense, because you are from Penang. And of course, this is the best achievement for Malaysian as well, given your achievement. What can Malaysia basically do to help youngsters, young researchers, to reach places like CERN, for instance?
Right. I think let's already make it clear that, in fact, Malaysia is contributing. Not just from Malaysians overseas, but groups here are involved already. I think on the one hand, those people need more exposure because that cultural appreciation that we have as a society, I think it's very strong. And telling those stories is really crucial to spreading the inspiration and giving them more support. At the same time, of course, those of us working overseas, we all have a strong connection to home. And therefore, beyond just sharing our stories, reaching out to us and looking for collaborations is a way to get involved. But again, I would stress that it's not a matter of trying to enter this these various fields, right? We are already there, and we should just be looking to see how we can build our impact up.
You mentioned that we do have the talents and also expertise locally who works with the global players as well. But how can our universities, better or improve further in terms of connect to the global research ecosystems?
I think we need to look for where our own capacities are strongest. Okay. For example, well, I don't have a concrete examples here, but the concept being, we can either leverage local competences, or if there are areas where we can study things of regional relevance but of global impact, then I think that's the key, identifying those places where we can make a difference and then starting to focus the efforts there.
Do we have that in your opinion?
So if we take, for example, I mean, this is drifting more into industry, but that's tightly coupled with academic collaborations, right? Is in the tech arena and the manufacturing of, say, semiconductors in Penang, for one thing, but also, I mean, we have a great knowledge of things like our local biology. This is, whether it's in pharmaceuticals or in epidemiology of the endemic diseases. I think those are some examples in a variety of fields.
Let's talk about the local researchers' hurdles or challenges in that sense. This is just to get your point of view, because we do have good researchers, because I talked to some of them at our local universities, but they are facing difficulties and also challenges in terms of getting funding or visibility, the storytelling that you mentioned just now, or lack of collaboration in that sense. But which of these three that you think is crucial for us to focus on?
I think they're intertwined, yeah, because, but maybe we need to start with the visibility, because the visibility promotes connectivity, and it also then helps that one can illustrate the local support, and that should then feed up to those who hold the purse strings, right? Because it's not just a matter of, say, a single cash injection. It's really a matter of sustained, focused investment in these that will allow them to build up and have the impact. Because none of this is built even in a single generation. It's a long-term process to develop the capacity.
The visibility, what can we basically do or learn the best practices from other countries?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're actually doing that already. Sending people overseas on scholarships, whether at the start of their university careers or partway through. I think actually the support of it for this is there. I've spoken to people here, I know others in my own career and elsewhere. I think that's strong. What needs to then be done is the follow-up to ensure that once these skills have been picked up, there is then support with the resources needed to continually exploit them and then also share with other groups here. And even, I believe we do a good job with then sharing with the region.
I want to talk about the role of GLCs in terms of co-invest in scientific partnership in Malaysia, and also at the same time moving forward, to push further in terms of the R&D, because I've talked to some of the researchers in local universities, because they said a lot of our R&Ds who actually can solve the real problem ended up at the bookshelf. So we want to be we want it to be commercialized in terms of that. But how do you see the role of GLC or even the private sector for this?
Yeah, right. I think that's a very good question because, of course, in academia, a lot of our culture is very centered on grant funding, and that's typically from the public sector, right, and from the government. So it's not entirely unknown. For example, actually, at CERN, we recently received a very large piece of support for this what's called a next generation trigger program from Eric Schmidt from Google. That's in effect actually philanthropy. It's giving with the expectation that we achieve something, but not a transactional project in the sense that a return on investment directly is wanted. And for some of the big breakthroughs, I believe that mentality is needed, but then of course we have to balance that against the immediate needs of the country, etc. So perhaps it's a matter of finding the balance where one can tie the potential gains from these long-term vision projects to things that we will clearly benefit from as they come to maturity.
Yeah, to have that mindset in terms of deciding to invest, because science is science, of course, means taking more risks and also is willing to face failure before you achieve any success. To have that mindset in our local landscape, do you think that is something that we had, or should we push further?
Right. I think with actually the success of all kinds of Malaysian entrepreneurs and artists and creatives, it's clearly there. But I think we can ask the question: how can that be built up, and how can it be reinforced? And one of the things I want to say, maybe perhaps unexpectedly, because I work in a scientific background, but by the time we get to doing serious scientific research, there are no objective facts. Right? We're working at the boundaries of our knowledge, and I think the way a lot of our education system is and how we're taught to answer questions, even those in the humanities, is to say these are the facts, and they're objectively correct, even if it's how to interpret a poem. You look it up in a guide, and so if anything, we probably do a good job of teaching the core facts in technical subjects like the sciences, but to be able to pose questions and then look for ways to answer them in those subjective topics, the humanities, or indeed in posing scientific research questions. I think that's where we have to develop the values, and it's difficult. It needs real investment in the teachers so that they can bring that to their students. You develop the culture of inquiry rather than just high scores on exams.
Yeah. I have to ask this question. I know this can be quite controversial in that sense, but just your point of view. Do you think that our education system is having that in terms of letting our students, our talents, asking for more difficult questions and try to find answers and all that?
I think it varies, just because we have a big disparity in the types of education that we all go through. Certainly, so I was in national education all the way to SPM. Right. I did do an IB diploma after that on a scholarship, and there was a difference. The first subject that I didn't do so well in once I went to the IB was in English literature, because that wasn't something I hadn't studied, and afterwards I picked up how to do some of this analysis. But again, it's a bit of a resource issue, because when you have disadvantaged students or teachers, they've got to work on meeting the bar, right? So again, it's not the sort of thing that one solves overnight or without some really long-term development. But I do believe that we have the individuals and some of the dedicated teachers who are able to do that, and it's about giving them a platform and or raising the bar for and the capabilities, enabling the rest of schools to be able to develop that. I mean, in school we were writing tons of essays. I can't write like that anymore. But it's those kinds of exploratory questions that, are the key to unlocking it.
Of course, Dr. Koo, looking ahead, what kind of ecosystem or policy support would help Malaysia build its own frontier science community locally?
It's a very good question. Perhaps we can look to some of our neighbors here and sort of contrast where there is or is not the same kind of consistent interest in fundamental research as opposed to applied research. I have the impression, it could be wrong, that Singapore, for example, has a very strong focus on applied research,
yes.
And less so on anything that isn't, sort of in their terms useful to society. But I mean, other places like India, for example, has had for a long history of doing fantastic work in mathematics and the theoretical subjects, and perhaps they might be one of the models that we can look to and understand how they have managed to develop that. The mindsets in some ways are not so different, right? We're also diligent and focused on mastering technical capabilities.
Yeah. I know it's quite sensitive to mention Singapore in that sense, because Malaysians don't like to look at Singapore in terms of a lot of things. But I think if we can learn a lot of good things from our neighboring countries, then be it, right? But my final question to the young Malaysians, especially who dream to be working in places like CERN or any other prestigious institutions, what would be your advice for that?
So let me start with actually that just keeping the passion, the excitement alive is the first thing that's going to get you anywhere. In my case, when I was interviewing for this scholarship to do IB at an international school, I was told, actually, your interview was not very impressive until we asked you about black holes. And then your eyes lit up and you impressed us with just the interest in what you wanted to learn. So that's going to be the motivating factor that keeps them going. And they shouldn't lose that spark. But when I was growing up, a lot of the things I was learning were coming through books, the odd documentary, but a lot of popular science books. And especially for those who may not have direct access to that sort of media, I think the thing that's hugely different between my childhood and now is the sheer amount of stuff that's available on the internet through YouTube and even TikTok. I have a good friend, British, who's a scientific celebrity on TikTok and communicates science about CERN, and she's far from the only person who does this. So, looking at when someone's flicking through these shorts, if they spend time on some of the educational content creators, there's a ton that they can learn from there, not just passively, but even actively engaging with them. As a matter of fact, there's also a student, Kaseh, who contacted me through my friend Clara, just reaching out to say, okay, I'm interested in hearing about Malaysians at CERN, and we made a connection there. So the resources are there, and people need to be brave and be willing to reach out and be heard.
Right. Dr. Koo, thank you so much for joining us and helping me to understand better about this very interesting topic actually, and for Malaysian as well. Thank you so much for spending time with us. That's all the time that we have. You can catch this interview on astro1.com. That's all for Agenda AWANI at Khazanah Megatrends Forum 2025. See you next time.